Well, Donald Trump is still on the warpath on trans rights in the US. He famously said in 2022 that he was going to cut down on them substantially, even forbidding doctors access, and he's repeated all this, any doctors who want to practice transitioning kids while they're still minors, obviously, would be blocked from Medicare, from Medicaid, and he would ensure that all federal agencies weren't encouraging people or even teaching minors about the transitioning process. He was recently asked, so what would you do about men in women's sports, trans women in women's sports? He had a very short, succinct answer I think you'll approve of.
It's a man playing in the game. I mean, physically, from a muscular, even if it was a little bit less, maybe they do all sorts of tests and drugs and everything else. Look at what's happened in swimming. Look at the records that are being broken.
So how do you stop it? Do you go to the sports leagues? Do you go to the Olympic
You just ban it. The president bans it. You just don't let it happen.
Sounds pretty simple. If only we could have someone say something similar here, a premier, a politician. That would be wonderful. But no, what do we get instead? I love his form on this particular issue because he's also said this election cycle that he'll cut federal funding to schools who teach critical race theory or any kind of what he calls, quote, transgender insanity and other inappropriate racial, sexual or political content to children, end quote. So he's being very serious, saying if you are found in your school to be teaching any of this stuff, we'll just cut the funding to you. So we're going to block these doctors from Medicare and Medicaid if they're practicing it. I'm just going to outlaw it across the board. All this gender-affirming care for children is not going to be happening on my watch, period. And as for men competing in women's sports, ban it. Done. Fixed.
You know, a lot of people say, oh, it's not that big a deal. You know, so what if occasionally in a sport somewhere, somehow this happens? And we talked a couple of weeks ago about the United Nations spokesperson on violence towards women who said, and I was astonished by these figures, that the UN found that 600 female athletes in 400 competitions over 29 different sports had lost more than 890 medals to biological men. So to dismiss this as an anomaly, one of those things that happens once in a blue moon, is just not true. And when even the United Nations will admit that, you know that, OK, there you go. With regards to Trump's comments there, it's just so refreshing to hear a politician take a question that, you know, could be a little dicey, and most politicians duck and weave and try to say something without saying anything in order to offend nobody. I think David Crisafulli in Queensland has been a textbook example of this over the last week, ducking and weaving around abortion rather than just being straight with people about what he really thinks. Sure, he's just a few weeks out from an election. He's trying to make sure he doesn't rock the boat. But it's nice to hear a politician who just says exactly what they think, straight to the point. You can agree or disagree, but at least you know what he thinks. It's nice.
Well, it was clarity, right? It was an answer. There is a problem, I'm going to fix it. And you so rarely see that in politics these days. And that's Trump's business brain, right? I mean, out in the real world, if there is a problem, you have to find a solution to it. You don't just keep dancing around the maypole and hoping that someone comes up with a good idea one day and, oh, well, if we spend a lot of money on the way getting there, who cares? It's not my money anyway. He's just thinking, well, here is problem, here is solution, institute solution. Now, no doubt, if he tried to do something like that, there'd be complaints all the way up through the courts and whatever to challenge it. But that's fine, that can all play out. At least he's made an effort to actually do something about it, which is so unlike what we see in politics so often these days.